Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, April 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 139 days. The game against Michigan in 223 days. Ohio State's spring football season is now over. Buckeyes wrapped that up on Saturday with the annual spring game in front of about 75,000 people inside Ohio Stadium. And for the most part, it felt like we kind of saw on Saturday what we had sort of been seeing during practice for most of the spring. The defense was better than the offense, but not completely dominant. And the quarterback play was pretty good for the most part. And the offensive line is still kind of the biggest question right now facing the team. So today we're going to be hearing from Ryan Day as he sort of looks back at what he saw during the spring game, what he maybe feels about his team coming out of the spring, and where they may have some areas where they might be able to improve. Let's start with that quarterback position. There was no Devin Brown on Saturday. He missed the spring game because of a finger injury. So it was just the Kyle McCord show among the two guys who are battling for that starting quarterback job this fall. And McCord had a good but not spectacular day, 18 of 34 for 184 yards and a touchdown. So what did Ryan Day think he saw out of Kyle McCord on Saturday?
I think what you saw in the game was similar to what you've seen in practice. Some good things, some things that you'd like to see a little bit better, but he's growing. I think that the picture sometimes was clean, other times not as clean. I think when Marvin only played a couple drives there, and then he was out, and certainly not having a Mecca and Julian and those guys. But as you saw, there was some sparks. I thought the throw to Carnell was an excellent one, but other stuff that he wants to look to improve on. So we'll get on the film and figure out what that was. And sometimes it's hard out there because there's so much going on, and it's going fast because you're calling it back and forth. So overall, 15 practices, and there was improvement there.
It's always a little tough to know what you're really looking at when you're watching a spring game, because every time the offense does something good, well, that's bad news for the defense, and vice versa. And that was maybe especially true on Saturday because of how many guys were missing. The Buckeyes were missing, for example, both starting linebackers. They were missing a huge chunk of their wide receiver unit. So Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming didn't play at all. Xavier Johnson didn't play at all. Marvin Harrison only played a couple drives. So when the secondary looks good, as it did on Saturday, how do you know if that's real? If that's really the secondary has improved that much, or is it just a function of, hey, a bunch of the starting wide receivers weren't around, and so that's why they looked pretty good? How do you know whether, when you're evaluating, how do you balance that? How do you know what's real and what might be fool's gold?
Yeah, you try to look at it through the whole 15 practices of what you've seen. If you're starting to see the secondary get their hands on some balls, and all of a sudden it doesn't happen for a few days, it's probably not real. We've seen that for almost 15 practices, what you saw today. So that was really good. I think the challenge will be increased in the preseason when, like you said, we're at full strength there. But you can just see the discernment. Everything's faster. They're moving faster. They're seeing it. And I think being year 2 in the system, adding Davis in there, you're starting to see the secondary move faster, make more plays, be more decisive.
One of the storylines you've heard a whole bunch about this spring is the possible transition of play calling from Ryan Day to Brian Hartline. So how did that work on Saturday, and where does Ryan Day feel like they are in that possible transition coming out of the spring?
Today we didn't really do much signaling. We just kind of huddled, and I kind of relayed the call in, and it was back and forth on the headset. And so there's been some growth there as well through 15 practices. We've had different times where we were able to get into some move-it situations where both sides were able to call it off the call sheet, not just script it. So that was great, and that's what happened today as well. So we'll look at it and evaluate it and keep working at it and see how it goes in the fall. Long way to the fall, but it's healthy for everybody to go through this, and it's everybody on the offensive side of the ball as well. Coming up with a game plan, coming up with plays, and then installing them, then putting them on the field. It's more than just play calling. And I think that's where, as you continue to grow and guys are in new positions, you learn. And there's only one way to do it, and that's to actually get out there and physically go through it.
Maybe the biggest offensive star of the day on Saturday was running back Chip Trayanum. Now, that is a little bit unusual. You don't generally see a running back putting up monster numbers in the spring game, but Trayanum had just 8 carries for 110 yards, including a 65-yard touchdown, averaging 13.8 yards per carry. And if you take that one long one out of there, he's still averaging about 7 yards per carry. So not too bad for Chip Trayanum. So that's sort of representative of what we've seen out of Trainham this spring, with Mayan Williams kind of limited, Travion Henderson out, Evan Pryor out. Trainham has really made the most of his opportunities this spring. So what did Ryan Day see out of him? And he'll also hear a little bit about that one carry that Archie Griffin got during the game as well.
Talk to him about what we see his role being, and it's at running back this year. You saw him put on some weight and be able to carry it. And, you can see he's got some high-end speed, some top-end speed. He comes out the back end, and he had that long run. But I still think he was the second leading ball carrier on the day. I think the first one was Archie Griffin, and that was fun watching him there. I think next year is the 50th anniversary of his first Heisman, so we wanted to make sure he came back for that one. And so the offense needed a little help at that point, too, right around the 30-yard line. So we felt like we called into the bullpen and pulled in 45, so that was good. But no, Chip has done a nice job. He's changed his body a little bit, gotten stronger. He's a load in there. You can see him hit it. So he has big playability. There were things that he did in the games that he played in last year that we liked, and so we're going to keep building on that.
Going into the spring game, Ryan Day had talked about the offensive line as potentially his biggest concern with the team, and I think after Saturday, the Ohio State fans may be kind of right there with him. You're trying to replace both tackles and your starting center, and the defensive line looked pretty darn good. They had 5 sacks over the course of the game and had the quarterbacks kind of running for their lives a bunch of other times as well. So how concerned is Ryan Day with that offensive line coming out of the spring?
Inconsistent. I thought that there was some good things, but we need more consistency there. The good news is on defense, we're getting in the backfield and creating confusion and chaos. So good to see the defense make some plays, and that was good, but we need more consistency there.
When things are not completely set, as they definitely are not with the offensive line, you end up seeing them rotating guys a bunch during that spring game. So, for example, you saw Zen Michalski with the ones, and then all of a sudden you'd see Tigre Shabola with the ones at right tackle. So you also hear a lot about the importance of consistency on the offensive line and letting that unit gel and work together and all that kind of stuff. So if you're rotating guys in the O-line like that, does that impact that at all? Does that impact your ability to evaluate that offensive line if you don't have that consistency from down to down or drive to drive?
Yeah, I don't know if that matters as much. I know what you're saying. I think that's more during the season when you start to get into calls and things like that. We were very vanilla on defense today. We didn't blitz one time, so there really isn't a lot of communication. That this is one-on-one, me against you technique. That's what really the spring is, we think, and then we start getting to schematics more. We did it a little bit at the end of spring, but more in the preseason. So this is about being able to consistently do it. When you flash, when we say, he flashed, what does that mean? That means he's done it once or twice. You've seen him do it. It's like coming home with an A in algebra. Then you expect to come home with an A in algebra all the time. You can't come home with a C then, in the second marking quarter or marking period. So that's what we're looking for. And that's what separates good from great players, is being able to do it all the time. So we need to see more of that.
In the 2020 season, Ohio State had the offense to win the national championship, and the defense just wasn't there. In the 2021 season, Ohio State pretty much had the offense to win the national championship, and the defense just wasn't there. In the 2022 season, Ohio State had the offense to win the national championship, and the defense just wasn't quite there. So now entering the 2023 season, the defense looked pretty darn good this spring during the scrimmages we got to see, the open practices we got to see, and then again on the spring game on Saturday. So is Ryan Day now feeling better about his defense coming out of the spring?
Well, I think when you leave the spring, you get a feel for where things are. And when you start the spring, it's hard. And I think you hear, me say or us say that, we'll get through the spring and we'll have a better feeling. So coming out of the spring, I think the first thing was the back end explosives. You saw today, we didn't really give up a lot of explosives, maybe just a couple there in the second half. And that's important for us, we expect to score a lot of points on offense, and if we can avoid explosive plays, then that's a recipe for winning, which that was the idea in 2019, and we need to continue to do that. So as we come out of the spring, we'll evaluate it, we'll go through each position, but there's reason for optimism for sure.
We mentioned Kyle McCord's stats off the top of the show. They weren't great, they weren't terrible. It was just kind of an okay day for Kyle McCord. But as we mentioned earlier, missing 4 guys or limited play or no play from 4 of the top wide receivers, and then the issues on the offensive line. When you're evaluating Kyle McCord's play, How much do you have to take that into account, that the offensive line was a little shaky, he's missing some of his top wide receivers? How do you weigh that when you're sort of evaluating his play on Saturday?
Oh, yeah, you take all those things into consideration. Yeah, for sure. It was, I know Devin was excited about playing in this game, so not being able to was disappointing for him. But I thought, Tristan and Kyle both, were out there competing, and it wasn't always a clean pocket, wasn't always a clean look on the back end. But I did like the throw he had for the touchdown. Those were, being able to make those throws are big down the field. When you have an opportunity to make those downfield throws, that's been the difference for us, that, when we were explosive, we're at our best football. And so that was a good step in the right direction.
Every year, Ryan Day talks about having an identity for his team and a theme that he's trying to build for his team. Is it too early to know what that theme is going to be, or what the identity of this team is going to be right now? Or is that something he has a decent grasp of at this point?
No, it's something that we wanted to forge early in the off season, and it was about competing. We've talked long and hard about how there's difference between hard work and competing. Everybody's working hard. If without it, you don't have a chance. But competing means winning or losing. And so we had a lot of win or loser. I think you guys were at a couple of the practices. You heard that all the time: win or loser, compete. We have another message that we want to get in the summer. We'll get into that down the road. But it's been about competing, and that when you go against your clone, when you go against your equal and talents equated, what are you going to win? What's your edge? And so that's been a huge message for us, and a focus and emphasis.
You've heard us talk over the years about leadership on the team, and generally when there's good leadership on the team, you don't talk a lot about it. But when there's a little bit of a lack of leadership, well, then you start having some issues, and then it becomes a topic of conversation during the season. So is that something that Ryan Day feels like, if there was good leadership last year, that some of that can carry over to this year, or do you got to just kind of start from scratch every year with that?
Well, we did the same thing we did the year before. So we went through the leadership, voted on that leadership committee, drafted squads, and I thought it was excellent. We're going to do that again. So we start again right after the spring. We'll draft, or we'll pick some new leaders, because some guys that you think are leaders in February maybe don't do a great job, or some emerge, and so that changes. And then we'll go through and have another draft, go through the summer workouts with Mick, and then we'll have a really good idea of who the captains will be when we get into August. So this is our second year doing the leadership committee and having these squads, and I think it's really built strong leadership in the team, and I feel good about where our leadership is at right now.
And finally, one more about Kyle McCord. You saw him making some difficult throws, far hash to the sideline kind of throws. That's the kind of big boy throws you're going to have to make in some big spots this year. Is Ryan Day happy with where Kyle McCord is and where Devin Brown is on that type of throw and some of that game management stuff coming out of the spring?
Yeah, I think Kyle and Devin both have strong arms. They can make that field throw. When you're playing against drop 8 and you're playing against, zone coverage like that, they're gonna drop pretty hard. And we relied a little bit on drop back pass. Once you get to drop back pass, you're seeing those guys drop into the zones, and then you have to really negotiate the zones. I thought when we did call a couple of the play actions and the RPO at the end there, where guys are down to the line of scrimmage and create more of that run pass conflict, it opened up some more windows. But I think Kyle can do all of those. We've seen them do that, where he can make all those throws. He can handle play action. He can handle RPO. He can handle drop back pass. He can make the field throws. So he definitely has the skill set.
Well, we are going to have a whole lot more to talk about the spring game, sort of wrapping up the spring as well as some transfer portal stuff, as well as some recruiting stuff. It is going to be a busy week at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeyes landed a commitment from running back Sam Williams-Dixon over the weekend. We already talked about Max LeBlanc, the tight end. So 2 commitments already in the book this weekend. More could be on the way this week or in the coming weeks, and plenty of transfer portal news and drama undoubtedly headed your way as well. So you're going to want to be at BuckeyeHuddle.com to stay up to speed with all of that stuff. Our fantastic team of insiders is going to be breaking down the X's and O's of that spring game. We'll be breaking down the recruiting impact of all those visits, where things are standing with some of those guys in the classes as that class sort of starts to take shape. And then, of course, what's it going to mean for this year's team? Team coverage, recruiting coverage, X's and O's coverage, it's all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So sign up today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.